Boozed and Confused is a comedy and weird topic podcast. Adult language may be used, probably by me. While our episode topics may be educational in nature, we are not responsible if your children start dropping the F-bomb to their kindergarten class. Listener discretion is advised. Hi, kids.
Oh, hardly doodly.
Oh, God, this is not a children's show. Hello.
What?
Welcome back. Oh, God. I'm Carolanne.
This is Matt.
Welcome back to another episode of Boozed and Confused. I don't know why you're here. I don't know why you come back, but there's some of you that do. So you've got a me episode today. You're going to have to bear with me. It gets a little sciencey at bits, and you got to remember I work in the corporate world. I don't do science at all. Actually, sometimes I think it would be cool to be like a park ranger when I retire, but then I remember like you have to actually know science and shit. So
When we were out near the dunes, I don't think you need to know science to charge people parking admission.
okay, yeah, no, that's fair.
That could be you.
That's fair. But remember, we did a hike in like Colorado that was like with a park ranger, and she had like a freaking PhD or something in something.
Yeah. There's levels to this.
Anyways,
Welcome to the parking lot. It's $10. Do you want to hear a fun fact about mosquitoes?
This is a leaf. Check for ticks when you're done.
I'll help check for you.
That's an extra $10. All right. Well, anyways, you got me for this episode for however long it takes. I might talk fast, so I apologize. But before we get into today, a couple of things that we talk about.
Things to clean up.
Stuff and things that we got to clean. The first is we're on all your favorite social medias, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and Twitter. And I've actually picked up a little bit in like the Twitter realm, reconnecting with people. So hello, friends that I've reconnected with who have not ignored me in their DMs despite our falling off the face of the earth for a while. Thanks for bearing with us. If social media is not really your thing, you want to send us a message, you could send us an email at boostandconfusedpodcast@gmail.com. Always appreciate reading messages. What is next? If you like the pod and you want to support us, the best way that you can do that is by leaving us a review and or subscribing or following, whatever it's called, on your platform of choice. And also just like telling your friends about us, unless you're really embarrassed that you listen to this podcast, because I'm really embarrassed that we make this podcast. So I would understand. I get it. It's fine. If you do happen to leave us a review and you take a screenshot and you send it to us, we'll send you some Boozed and Confused stickers in the mail for free.
Yeah, we'll just leave it at that. We'll send them to you.
Yeah, that's it.
We'll figure it out.
And the last bit of this is what are you drinking?
Oh, you beat me to it.
I did.
This is a Goose Island lemonade shandy. Seems like it's Goose Island's response to Leinenkugel's summer shandy.
Took them long enough.
This one's very sweet.
Yeah.
It's very sweet.
Yeah.
Like it's a lemonade shandy. So where I think Leinenkugel has more of like a beer taste with a hint of lemon. This is like lemon
with a hint of
with
beer.
A hint of beer. But it's pretty good. This is my first one I've ever had, and it's decent. It's called lemonade shandy main squeeze.
We had a couple of friends over last night who gave us some of these, and then one of them was drinking the grapefruit lemonade shandy, I think it is, and she said it was really good. So I don't know, go out and try it if you got it available to you.
Yeah, they're everywhere now, aren't they? Goose Island?
I think they did sell out,
something.
yeah. Pretty sure they sold out. And then
speaking of sellout,
This episode brought to you by Kirkland's Signature Citra Hop Session IPA. It's a craft brewed ale that is 4.9% ABV. It's an IPA that greets you with a golden hue and a refreshing citrus-like aroma. Jesus Christ, this is long. And there's a bright hoppy flavor. It's delicious. Whatever.
It's all right.
No,
it's okay.
You know
it's
what?
Okay.
Here, I'll be the first to admit it. I can't really tell the difference between a lot of IPAs unless it's like very specific,
Fair
like
enough.
certain kinds of fruits, or like this has a chocolate overtone, which is disgusting.
Would you ever see a chocolate
IPA? No.
I don't
No.
think so.
No. But you understand what I'm saying.
Chocolate stout is where I'm at.
IPAs to IPAs they all taste the same to me unless there's something special about it. Therefore, I enjoy spending my money on the great deal of the Kirkland Signature IPA. It's like $20 for a box of 24. You can't beat that.
You can get a PBR case of
That's disgusting. I said good
99
beer.
beers.
I said good beer. All right, well, enough bullshitting. Let's talk about some people who do bullshit or have bullshitted, and that's why we're here today.
This is politicians?
This is shockingly not a corporate conspiracy. It's not a political episode. This is probably something you've heard recently in the news, I'm betting. We've had a few of those. But it kind of feels like every few months we're teased with like something in news headlines about Alzheimer's research progress being made. There's always some sort of like breakthrough, or like on the flip side, they're like, this promising trial completely flopped and had no signs of improvement whatsoever. And it's not like abnormal for scientific research and the world of trials. It's like kind of what they're meant to do. It's a lot of, pun intended, trial and error, and like improving from what you've learned and so on and so forth. It's just very expensive. Trials are very expensive. But a lot of eyebrows are being raised because of some shocking news that came out recently. So for a lot of years, I didn't know any of this shit before I started doing the research, because I don't really follow this kind of research very closely. So for those who do, if I mispronounce anything in today's episode, I'm sorry. You don't have to tweet us about how dumb I am and tell me to stick to the corporate world.
Tweets.
So for years, it's been believed that this specific amyloid protein might be responsible for cognitive decline. This is from this like super influential paper that was published in Nature in 2016, which like if you're a researcher or a scientist and you get published in Nature, that's like your Emmy. That's your Golden Globe, your Oscar. That's like one of the biggest recognitions I think that you could get.
Just out there in nature.
Yeah.
Out in the trees. Sing your words.
All right, well, it's been great. Thanks. See you next week.
Have a good one.
So this paper was published in Nature in 2006, and it just so happens to be like one of the most cited pieces of Alzheimer's research in the last like 2 decades. So this study specifically looked at cognitive decline in mice, and this hypothesis that they had has dominated the Alzheimer's research field. And researchers for all of these years have worked to understand why this protein leads to decline.
This one protein, scientists hate it.
Can you figure it out? Only people with an IQ of 215 can do this Alzheimer's amyloid beta protein
Are the
puzzle.
proteins folding?
God. So all of this changed when a whistleblower and Vanderbilt University professor named Matthew Schrag. Matthew, if you listen to this, I'm sorry, because I'm sure that's not how you pronounce your last name, but I'm trying. He recently went to science.org and said that he and other reviewers identified as many as 10 papers on this specific protein that like maybe need another set of eyes. So in this science.org report, there were other prominent researchers who were cited as having said that they could not replicate the results of the studies on these specific proteins, which may be like, I don't know. I think like when you're in this field, it's believed that you should be able to replicate something to understand if it's like an anomaly or if it's like something that's true in nature and like what you're doing versus just like a statistical anomaly chance of never having replicated this ever again.
Yeah, you do their science. You do their science when you do your science, and you hope you get the same answer.
Yeah, exactly. It's like looking over your shoulder while you're doing a test, and you're hoping that you get 5 and he gets 5, but actually he's like, I don't know, on fractions. So good luck. Anyway, so Schrag gets like dragged into this whole thing back in August of 2021 when a colleague is trying to connect him with this attorney who's investigating simufilam. This is the only one I didn't actually look up how to say. But it's this experimental Alzheimer's disease drug, right? And it's created by Cassava Sciences, who said that it improved cognition, partly by repairing a protein that can block sticky brain deposits of this protein, amyloid beta. Are we all following? Any questions to this point?
Yeah, I don't even, yeah.
Yes, great. So the attorney's clients, who are 2 prominent neuroscientists, believed that some of the research related to this drug may have been fraudulent. So the way that this is working is they created this drug based off of the research that they had, and then that's how it went to trials and everything. So then getting down to the root of it, they said the research that they based everything off of was fake. So that's where we are today.
I remember you bringing this up during the week earlier. Well, this is like early in the week, but you told me this the other day, and I was the only info I get on like the Alzheimer's updates is like Reddit.
Yeah,
I always get really hopeful.
Yeah,
I always get really hopeful, and
it's the hope that kills you.
And then you just dash them on the ground.
Yeah. So Schrag is not new to this. He's already gotten some public attention for criticizing the FDA for approving a different drug related to this called Aduhelm. I don't know why the fuck these are named so weirdly. Just, I don't know, because it's science stuff. That's probably why.
It sounds more sciencey.
Yeah, exactly. Also, it sounds a lot better in commercials, I'm sure. So his own research about this drug contradicted some of Cassava's claims. So Cassava is the drug maker.
That's claiming that they've got this miracle cure.
So he personally believed that volunteers that were in these trials faced risks of serious side effects with really no chance of benefit. So he was trying to like raise the alarms of like, hey, this is kind of problematic. You're putting people in trials. There's really likely no chance that they're going to see anything from it. But now you're suscepting them to all of these side effects that they could get. You know, they could come out of the trial with like a third arm. Who knows? So these attorneys pay him $18,000 to investigate these published images about the drug and like all of the underlying science that comes with it. And during this investigation, he identified altered or duplicated images in dozens of journal articles, which is kind of mind-blowing to me that you could get away with this for that long and like no one is really checking it or fact-checking or QAing or anything. So the attorney reports this to the FDA. Schrag reports this to an organization called the National Institutes of Health, which you will hear throughout the rest of this pod described as the NIH. The NIH had invested tens of millions of dollars into this work that he's now like, hey, you've got some problems here. Okay. It's during this that he finds other elements of misconduct, which is centered around this highly influential 2006 study that was published in Nature. Okay. Schrag is like, he's not some corporate guy reading some shit he read on the internet for a podcast. He's like a neuroscientist and a physician. Like, he's really well qualified in this field. He's got this amazing story. He's done a lot of really wonderful research. You can read more of his backstory on the science.org article that's the top of our show notes. But he told science.org, quote, "I focus on what we can see in the published images and describe them as red flags, not final conclusions," and says the data should speak for itself.
Okay. I love when they say that.
Yeah, the data should speak for itself. So he's calling out what he believes are manipulated images in multiple papers that were changed solely to better support this hypothesis that like all of this decade and a half of research has been based off of, which is absolutely fucking wild. So all of this work that's being questioned comes back to this researcher named Sylvain Lesne. I think I'm pronouncing that correctly. He's an associate professor at the University of Minnesota. Okay. So Schrage doesn't go as far to say like this is fraudulent. He says he doesn't have access to like the original complete unpublished images and raw numerical data to be able to say like, yes, this is fraudulent or altered or what have you. So with this, science.org begins a 6-month investigation, and their findings pretty much end up supporting Schrage's suspicions. Like, yep, you're right. This shit is fake. Or like, there's something really fishy here.
They used Photoshop.
Yeah. So a leading independent image analyst and a lot of top Alzheimer's researchers reviewed most of Schrage's findings at Science's request, and they all concurred with his overall conclusions, which pretty much cast doubt on like hundreds of images that were published in these studies and reports, including more than 70 in Lesne's papers, which is insane. And so some of these experts are like, this is shockingly blatant examples of image tampering within the community, which is insane.
So they tamper with the images to fit a dialogue of them figuring it out?
Exactly. So they have this hypothesis going into it. They then alter the images after the fact to support the hypothesis when, in fact, their original images probably did not support the hypothesis. They just didn't want to be wrong, which is insane. So Elizabeth Bick, B-I-K, says that the authors appear to have composed figures by piecing together parts of photos from different experiments. She's a molecular biologist and a forensic image consultant, which is like two very interesting careers to put together. It's some CSI shit. She goes on to say the obtained experimental results might not have the desired results and that data may have been changed to better fit a hypothesis. So, like, yeah, the outcome didn't match what we were hoping for, but we got to make it match what we were hoping for. Bada bing, bada boom, you change some images and whoop, there it goes. It now supports what we were originally looking for.
You still got me on the $10 million of...
Oh, it gets worse.
Oh.
It gets a lot worse. I think that's one of the worst parts of this. So all of this comes down to a similar conclusion, which is Lesne's papers have misdirected this research for almost 2 decades because so much of it has been influenced by shit that he published that has now been proven false, which is insane.
I think that's worse than $10 million.
Oh, it gets worse. So there's a Nobel laureate and a Stanford University neuroscientist named Thomas Südhoff. He says that the immediate obvious damage is wasted NIH funding and wasted thinking in the field because people are using these results as a starting point for their own experiments. Yeah, it's like, why would you reinvent the wheel when you already have this, what you believe to be sound science, to start your own experiments off of? Something that I thought was really interesting that I did not think would be a problem, but it seems like it is what some scientists call the amyloid mafia within the Alzheimer's research community, which means that if you're trying to advance other Alzheimer's causes, like you're a scientist, you're doing all your own stuff, and you're like, oh, immune dysfunction or inflammation are actually, you know, potential causes for Alzheimer's that I would like to investigate, you would be sidelined by this mafia. Because the amyloid hypothesis became like the equivalent of the theory that says the sun and the planets rotate around Earth. Like within, you know, Alzheimer's research. That's how high they had regarded this hypothesis from Lesne.
That everything goes around the Earth.
Well, no, that's not him, and I'm saying that's the equivalent of what they believe to be their finding.
They incorrectly believed.
They believed based off of shit that he made up.
The incorrect material.
Yes. Okay. And here's where it gets a lot worse. So because this hypothesis was so widely believed and expanded on in the community, there have been hundreds of clinical trials and of therapies that target this protein that obviously have not yielded much. A lot of them have not been successful at all. And the NIH spent about $1.6 billion.
Okay, yeah, that's a little worse.
On projects that mention amyloids in this fiscal year alone.
This fiscal year,
which is about half of its overall Alzheimer's funding. I feel like I've said a lot that's insane this episode, but like it's crazy to me that it's gotten this far and Lesne's gotten this far without much, like, I don't know, like anything from anybody. He would have gotten away with it if it wasn't for that meddling Shreg.
Curse you.
So when 2006 came around, the Alzheimer's research community believed that the field maybe needed like a reset, if you will. I don't think that there was a lot really happening. There weren't a lot of developments happening. So then this Nature paper is published, and it comes from the lab of UMN, University of Minnesota, physician and neuroscientist Karen Ash. She was already well known for a remarkable series of discoveries that she had worked on. So she was a medical resident at UCSF, and she contributed to Nobel laureate Stanley Prusner's work on prions, which are like infectious proteins that cause rare neurological disorders. I'm not going to pretend to understand what any of this shit is.
This is juvenile material.
Yeah. So in the mid-90s, she creates this transgenic mouse that churns out human A beta, I guess we'll call it, that amyloid beta protein.
Yeah.
Which forms plaques in the animal's brain. And so this mouse also shows dementia-like symptoms, and it became a favored Alzheimer's model. Okay. Here's where we get like just a little bit more sciencey, if you could just bear with me. If it's obvious that I'm reading off of the science article, because there's no way I could make my own thoughts around this, you'd be right. So the 2000s come around. These, quote, toxic oligomers? Oligomers?
Yeah,
sure.
Absolutely.
Which are subtypes of that A beta that dissolve in some bodily fluids, had gained traction within the community as a like main culprit for Alzheimer's, or so they believed. So they'd been linked to impaired communication between neurons in vitro and in animals, and autopsies showed higher levels of these oligomers in people with Alzheimer's than in people without Alzheimer's. And so no one really proved that any one of the many known oligomers directly caused cognitive decline. Okay, so let's go back to these like mice that Ash had. Her team discovers an unknown oligomer species, which was dubbed amyloid beta star 56. Okay, we're going to talk about this a lot, so stay with me. They isolate it, they inject it into young rats, and the rats' ability to recall simple previously learned info, like where the location of a hidden platform was in a maze, completely plummeted. They like lost their basic sense of knowing any shit.
Okay.
So the 2006 paper's first author, sometimes credited as the discoverer of this A beta star 56, is Lesne. Goes all back to him. He worked with Ash. She hired him straight out of a PhD program, from a university in France. Okay. So she touts the star 56 on her website as like the first substance ever identified in brain tissue in Alzheimer's research that had been shown to cause memory impairment. And so there's this like editorial nature that calls it out, and like she's getting a lot of media hype around it. And then 2 weeks after the paper is published, she wins a prestigious prize for neuroscience, partly for her work leading up to this A beta star 56. Okay. So we'll go back to that 2006 Nature paper. It has been cited in about 2,300 scholarly articles, which is more than all but 4 other Alzheimer's basic research reports published since 2006. So to put that into perspective.
Yes, please put that. I have no perspective on any of this.
I mean, I don't either. But that means like a pretty substantial amount of Alzheimer's research that's been done in the last decade and a half is based on fraudulent data.
Mm-hmm.
So since then, annual NIH support for studies labeled amyloid, oligomer, and Alzheimer's has risen from nearly 0 to 287 million last year. And their work around the star 56 protein helped spark that explosion. Okay.
Right.
So Lesne gets like a lot of notoriety and credit for this discovery. He joins UMN with his own fucking NIH funded lab in 2009, where that amyloid beta star 56 remains a primary research focus for him, despite knowing that it's just bullshit, which I think is the most astounding part to me. Even more insulting, more recently in 2020, he becomes a leader of UMN's neuroscience graduate program, and just this past May of 2022, he receives a coveted R01 grant from the NIH with up to 5 years of support. And this grant comes 4 months after Schrag was like, hey guys, there's some really concerning shit about this guy's work. Which I don't really understand why they would still give him that grant, but whatever. So Schrag is doing this investigation in 2021, finds a site called PubPeer, which is a site where scientists flag possible errors in published papers. Sounds like a great time.
Sounds like a really, really enjoyable pastime. Oh yeah, I just read other really smart people's things and just say they're wrong.
Yeah. I mean, I would love to. I'm sure you have to have some sort of like verified credentials to be able to join that site.
It's not Wikipedia.
It's
not Wikipedia. You can just log in.
Engage in some sort of discussion there. I'd love to just take a look out of curiosity. So he's focused on those cassava-linked scientists, and he's looking for examples that could refine his own sleuthing, as he's doing his research. But finds postings about articles in the Journal of Neuroscience when he's searching for Alzheimer's. So these postings questioned the authenticity of blots used to differentiate that A beta and similar proteins in mouse brain tissue. I can't really describe to you what the images look like. It's literally just like little blots in rows and columns, and they're all varying. But you can tell if you look at the science.org article, they break it down of what it looks like, what it should look like, how you know it's fake. There's like tests that they do with it. So I can't describe that super well, but if you're curious and looking at the image, it's in science.org. So what they found is that several bands, so if you think about like the rows of just this little blot, seemed to be duplicated. So Schrag does all of this like investigative work with his little, I don't know, Photoshop maybe? I don't know. Maybe it's Microsoft Paint. Who knows? So he confirms that PubPeer's comments were right, and they also found similar problems with other blots in the same articles. So he found some blot backgrounds that seem to have been improperly duplicated. So basically, Lesne was like photoshopping his fucking work.
We've been doing science for like over 10 years off of a cheap copy and paste.
Yeah. A bad copy and paste is exactly it. And I think the parts that's most shocking is like it wasn't discovered until literally just now, which is maybe the most infuriating part. So 3 of these papers list Lesne, who Schrag had never really heard of before, and Lesne was like the senior author on this. So Schrag finds that another Lesne paper had also drawn scrutiny on PubPeer, and he broadens his search to the Lesne papers that had not been flagged there. Okay, so this investigation, he said, just like developed organically, and there were just other problems. It was literally problem after problem that was emerging from all of this Lesne work that he found.
Oh my gosh.
So Schrag says, quote, "So much in our field is not reproducible, so it's a huge advantage to understand when data... God, I can't talk. It's a huge advantage to understand when data streams might not be reliable. Some of that's going to happen reproducing data on the bench, but if it can happen in a similar, faster way, such as image analysis, it should." So he runs across the Nature paper, the basis for many others, and it seemed to all contain multiple doctored images. So he's basically going down the rabbit hole. He's finding doctored image after doctored image.
How many Photoshops?
Enhance. So we're going to rewind just a hot second about that amyloid beta star 56 that Ash and Lesne found, because it just keeps getting worse. So a woman named Donna Wilcock, with a really unfortunate last name, who's a very smart woman, she's an Alzheimer's expert at the University of Kentucky, and has doubted the studies that claim to use that, like, quote, purified A beta star 56, and even says that several labs have tried and failed to find it. So, like, literally, they're like, yeah, we have this, like, breakthrough new protein that we found, and literally not a single person can replicate it. Nobody. And so, apparently, things are sensitive in the field. Journals are like uninterested in negative results. Researchers don't want to like put things out that maybe contradict famous investigators. So people are trying to reproduce this work, and no one is getting anywhere close. They cannot find this star 56 shit anywhere.
And so then they start using Photoshop.
Yeah, and then the Photoshop just continues.
And then we're all just doing wrong science, hoping that no one else figures out that we're all doing wrong science.
Yeah, we're all just fakers, actually. Maybe this is where the imposter syndrome is like really the biggest with this
in the
fucking
field of
Lesne
science.
guy. Yeah. So there's one exception to this, though. This guy named Dennis Selko. Dennis, I'm sure you're not listening to this. So I'm sorry, that's probably not your last name. He is from Harvard University, and he cites the Nature paper at least 13 times. In two 2008 papers, he said he couldn't find A beta star 56 in human fluids or in tissues.
But we're going to keep trying to find the elusive star fluid.
The producer's like, we got to find that star. So in science, once you publish your data, he says, if it's not readily replicated, then there's real concern that it's not correct or true. So kind of like what I was saying is you want it to be something that you could reproduce, so it's not just like chance. You're not just,
Absolutely.
It's not an anomaly.
You want the science to be copyable.
Right. So he said there's precious little clear-cut evidence that A beta star 56 exists, or if it does exist, correlates in a reproducible fashion with features of Alzheimer's, even in animal models. So he's pretty much just calling bullshit.
Mm-hmm. Politely.
Very nicely. So he agreed that there's at least 12 or 15 images where there's just no explanation other than pure manipulation from what Lesne had published. One is an image in the Nature paper displaying purified, quote, A beta star 56. And he says it shows very worrisome signs of tampering. And that same image reappeared in a different paper co-authored by Lesne and Ash 5 years later. Okay. We're going to get a little sciencey again. I'm sorry in advance. So to further call out this bullshit from Lesne, Selko recalls some of Lesne's papers where he described this technique that he had apparently come up with that he, said it was supposed to measure the A beta oligomers separately in brain cells, spaces outside the cells and cell membranes. And Selkoe was like, that's not real. There's like no fucking way that that's real. So he's skeptical and says, quote, all of us who heard about that knew in a moment that it made no biochemical sense. If it did, we'd all be using a method like that. Which is wild because the 2006 Nature paper depended on that method. So how did we get this far?
And it just be okay. And
yeah. That's what I want to know. But what's interesting is it's not the first time that Selkoe is getting familiar with Lesne. So he actually co-authored a 2006 paper with Lesne, a different one, that included an image that experts agree was reprinted as if it was like original in 2 subsequent Lesne articles, which Selkoe called highly egregious.
I love that word.
So from this investigation, there's more than like 70 suspect Lesne papers, 10 of which concerned this A beta star 56. And Lesne and his collaborators recently published 2 corrections out of all of those ones that are suspect. The first correction that they went through is pretty noteworthy. Lesne claimed that the earlier versions had just been processed inappropriately. Like, oh, sorry, guys, there was a problem with the fax machine and something got a little messed up in the printer, and also the ink maybe bled a little bit, but here's the real images. You know, you're fine.
Mm-hmm.
In reality, Schrag says even the corrected images show numerous signs of improper changes in bands. And in one case, there's like a complete replacement of a blot. So again, just fake.
In one picture, he just like drew like pencil.
Yep, here it is. Drew a little smiley face. So even the corrections are being falsified, which is just gross. I like have to wonder what the fuck this guy is going to do now, because obviously his name is tarnished, as it should be from his own doings. Science.org contacted Ash, and she posted to PubPeer. I imagine PubPeer is just like a bunch of fucking nerds fighting. Like it's like, I imagine it to be like a Reddit.
It's like a smart Reddit.
Almost, yeah. Reddit is smart. I'm an intellectual, and I only watch Rick and Morty because I'm an intellectual.
I went through a dozen replies of one guy saying, well, you're not a physician. And then another guy goes, how do you know that I'm not a physician? And it wasn't about the guy's knowledge on body parts. It was how do you know that I'm not a physician?
Because it's the internet. You can just make anything up. I love, like, side tangent. I love, you find like the random profiles where a guy posts a story that's like something heinous, like my wife cheated on me and blah, 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 blah. But then like 3 days ago, he was like, oh, my boyfriend did this. How, you know, just like just making farmers. Shit up. Yeah. So anyway, so Ash goes to PubPeer and she provides a defense for some of the images that were called into question. So some, to be fair, were shown to just truly have been like harmless digital artifacts. No harm, no foul. It's fine. Maybe it was just a printing error. But the original images that she posted revealed evidence that you just can't deny, that multiple bands were copied and pasted from adjacent areas. So it was literally just like a Control-C, a Control-V. One of Lesne's like previous colleagues, someone named Dennis Vivian, co-authored about 5 Lesne papers that were flagged by Schrag. So he said that the papers, Dennis Vivian said that his papers with Lesne were valid. He defended them. But he said he had a lot of reason to be wary of Lesne, saying he found images that looked dubious to him.
Dubious.
Asked other students to replicate the findings. They couldn't, shockingly. And Vivian confronted Lesne, who was like, well, maybe I'm just too smart. Maybe you got dumb science boys in here. I don't know what he actually said. That's not a quote.
I do the most science. I do the best science.
Pretty much. He was like, I didn't do anything wrong. So Vivian withdrew that paper before publication, one, to preserve scientific integrity, because it just really threw him off about what Lesne was doing and his old attitude about it. But then two, broke off contact with Lesne entirely after that to save, his own street cred. So a ton of the papers that had published Lesne's work are now doing some of their own investigations. Mm-hmm. So Schrag did this investigation all on his own. He went to science.org and blew the whistle, because some of these agencies, like the federal agencies and schools like universities and journals, are just taking their sweet ass time with these investigations for Lesne's work. And he blew the whistle, so to speak, because he wanted to speed the process up. And to his point, he was saying, if we know that some of this work is falsified and work is still being done and trials are being done and money is being invested,
it's just a waste.
It's a waste.
It's a massive waste.
He's like, we you need to cut the head off now, because there's just been too much sunk into false work. So he blew the whistle, knowing it might jeopardize his ability to receive grants, which is huge in this line of work,
right.
And access to publications that are crucial for getting his work out there, which is unfortunate. But he says, and I'll end it with this: you can cheat to get a paper, you can cheat to get a degree, you can cheat to get a grant, you can't cheat to cure a disease. Biology doesn't care.
Honey Badger don't give a shit.
So,
that's great.
Yeah. So that is today's episode. I hope you bared with me through some of the science parts. If I mispronounced anything, I tried really hard. I hope you know that. And yeah, this is kind of fucking wild to me. So I'm really curious what's going to happen with, Alzheimer's research going forward. And once all of these other independent investigations are done, what's going to happen?
Yeah, this was a huge... me not following any science really at all. Just I thought they were getting so close.
Yeah, I did too. And I think maybe that's my own fault for believing headlines too much. But I also have to wonder if these, I talked about the amyloid mafia. I wonder if some of the folks that got sidelined by that mafia are now maybe feeling some vindication, and maybe they'll get a little bit more of a look now that some of this work has proven to be fraudulent. But
yeah,
I guess we'll
maybe
see.
Someone out there does have something closer to the answer, and this breaking will allow other processes to be explored.
Yeah, make their way downtown, walking fast, faces pass, and Lesne's going to jail. All right, well, that was today's episode. It's not a corporate conspiracy. It's not a political episode. It's just
it's pretty dang close, though.
Just good old corruption and conspiracy from one individual who's trying to sideline decades of Alzheimer's research. So
he's just really smart.
Yeah, he's just doing his own science. It's alternative science. So
there it is.
Okay, well, thanks so much for joining us. I know we're a day late. And we'll see you next week at some point. Might be Monday, it might not be.
You're not my boss. Bye.
Bye.